Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Good Burger, home of the Good Burger. May I take your order? Cruising right along in topic 8. Today we're going to talk about choosing the appropriate measures of center. And so far this topic we've talked about a number of different ways where you can take a data set and sort of find the center. The two you use the most are mean and median, but in certain scenarios one might be more appropriate than the other, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So just some data vocabulary. An outlier is a data value that is very different from the other values. It could be much higher. It could also be much lower than other data values. For example, if we were to take the ages of the people in this room right now, right? If you looked around, all the students probably around 10, 11, 12 years old. However, the adult in the room, closer to 40, 50, 100, right? Very different age. They would be considered an outlier, right? On the other hand, right, if you go to family dinner, right, and you happen to be the only kid there, all of those adults, 40, 50, 100 years old, you're the only 10-year-old there, right? So then you become the outlier. And so an outlier, again, is something that's just, it's very different, it has a very different value than the rest of the data set. And so when we talk about this, right, because of outliers and because of the way data is collected, we might have different measures of center be more appropriate in certain scenarios. And so if you're following along in your notes, right, you can highlight along with me as I highlight, right? I'm going to choose some different colors. So the first one we're going to talk about is mean. Mean, you will remember, right, that's what we most often think about when we say average, okay? So mean is appropriate when there is no outlier, right? And when the data is clustered close together, right? When the data is very consistent, right? If we were to find the average of the students' ages in this room, just the students, mean would be very appropriate because all of the ages are very similar. The average age is going to be clustered within that group. On the other hand, if there is an outlier, right, median, right, which is the middle value, median would be the most appropriate. And you're probably asking, right, why does it matter if there's an outlier or not? And so the answer to that is that when we talk about median, right, let's say that we took 5 people's ages in this room, right, 2 10-year-olds, 2 11-year-olds, and then me, the 100-year-old. Right? If we're talking about median here, well, with median, right, the 100 isn't really, I mean, it's worth 100, but we count it just like one value, right? And so when we start crossing out here, right, we still get an appropriate average age for the person in this room, right? There are 19 of you who are 10 and 11 years old, so the average age should be around 10 or 11 years old, right? The 100 isn't counted with as much weight. Whereas if we found the mean of these numbers, right? So I'm going to do 10 plus 10 is 20, plus 22 is 42. So we have 142 divided by 5, right? If anybody wants to figure that out. Right? Gives us an average age in this room of 28.4. Right, and so because there is an outlier, right, it pulls all of your ages up when we talk about the average. Okay. And then finally, the mode would be most appropriate, right, if the data is either not numeric, for example, what's your favorite ice cream, or if it doesn't fall into specific intervals, right, if there's not really a nice grouping of numbers, the mode might be the most appropriate. If any of these 3 things isn't really sitting right with you right now, feel free to come and ask me some questions, but we're going to look at some examples in the next slides. So Gary is reviewing his scores on his weekly quizzes. Here are the last several weeks. We're going to circle any outliers, if there happen to be any. Then we're going to find the mean, median, and mode of the data set. So we have done almost all of these things before, so feel free to pause the video and try it on your own. So the first thing we need to do is put the numbers in order numerically from least to greatest. You'll see that here. Circling any outlier, right, that's any value that's extremely higher than the rest of the numbers or lower. You'll notice that Gary here had one bad week where he didn't do so hot. Perhaps that was in topic 4 with our algebra and solving equations unit, right? And so now we're going to talk about mean, median, and mode, right? I'll start with the mode, right? The mode here, you can clearly see there are 2 98ths, so that means that's the mode. Right? Median, the exact middle value, right? If we go a low value and then a high value, a low value, and then a high value, a low value, and a high value, low, and high, we end up with these two left in the middle. And so the median, halfway between those, would be 90.5. Right? And so then the mean, right, we're going to add all of them up and then divide by 10, the number of points in our data set. Right, I added all of these values up on my calculator. I got 887. There are 10 weeks in this particular data set, 10 quiz scores. I divided by 10. I got a mean of 88.7. If any of these things aren't sitting right, please come and see me. All right? So, we just in the last slide found these answers. Right? That the mode was 98, that the median was 90.5, and that the mean was 88.7. And now we want to talk about, well, which measure of center will give the most accurate picture of what's going on? And so the answer to that is the median and that is because there is an outlier, right? You'll recall in the last question we asked, well, was there an outlier? We said 65 was an outlier. And when there is an outlier, we choose median, right? Because it counts the outlier less, right? It counts it equal to everything else, right? It's one value. Last question here, which measure of center, mean, median, or mode should Gary tell his parents? And why do you think that, right? Maybe pause and think about that. Pause and write that down. Right? And the answer here would be the mode. And in this particular case, the reason for that being the mode, the number that happens the most frequently is those 98ths. And so those would be Gary's highest quiz scores. All right. In this last set, we're going to just pick the measure of center that is best to use with each of these 3 data sets. And I'm going to invite you to pause the screen and think about that. I've got the 3 choices at the bottom, mean, median, mode, also when to use them. So see if you can figure that out. Just for fun, let's start at the bottom with C. Those might be test scores or average ages of some elderly people at the table for a light lunch, right? But here I found the mean, and it actually fits both of the qualifications, right? There is no outlier, right? All of those values are really close together. They're within, right, 2 or 3 of one another. And then that also kind of gets to the second point here, right, that the data is closely clustered together, right? So the mean would be the best measure of center. Keeping you on your toes, let's skip to A, right, where I chose to find the median. And the reason for that is, right, this number circled in red, right, this is an outlier. 25 is clearly much higher than the rest of that data set. Right, that's like a 25, that's a parent maybe taking all of the neighborhood kids out for ice cream. Right, and so what's the average age in that minivan? Right, the median would be the best way to find that. And then finally B, right, what's your favorite color might be that question, and we chose mode because in this particular case the data is, right, it's non-numeric, right, the answers are color choices. If anything today maybe didn't sit right, please come and see me. Let's talk about it. Let's ask those questions. Otherwise, please log on to the Savas and complete 8-6 and have a great day.